What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting preview for this week's Valspar Championship. Coming out a little bit later than usual because of a little bit of a weather edge that we've got in the works. So going to touch on all of that here in this video, as well as my custom modeling, some of the key stats that I'm using to identify my top plays. And afterwards, we're going to go through some of my exposure for this week, both from the outright betting side, there with some outright bets, as well as some core plays and value plays for GPPs. And I'm going to be getting well over the field on. So a lot to touch on here, especially with that added little weather edge. So let's start there, then we'll talk about what we usually do over here on these videos. This weather edge is so large, and in fact, some books like DraftKings and FanDuel have already started to account for it out there on their odds. And what you can see over here with the Innisbrook Resort is that on Thursday, most of these models that we have here, and I've got all of them up at the same time, have been cranking up as the day goes on. And even a few of them have some rain over there during the afternoon. So this GFS, maybe the one I trust the most out of all of these, has a little bit of a sprinkle coming in around 4 or 5. But you've got a few on here like ECM that have a little sprinkle, but Medio Blue has a little bit more of a steady rain over there in the afternoon. And if it's going to get windier as the day goes on, you can see the sustained winds in the 20-mile-an-hour range over there on the GFS. Wind gusts getting close to 35 miles an hour out there by the afternoon. And when you go over here to Friday, it looks like that same side of the draw, the PM wave from the first day that got the harder side of conditions, is also going to get that over there on Friday. So it's not just the winds that look a little bit higher over there in the morning, but also the temperatures, which are going to be a lot cooler for most of the day. So you can see over here close to 54 degrees, which is just super freezing down here in Florida. But the wind gusts and sustained winds all kind of dropping as the day goes on. And you can see some of these other models like ECM, Icon, Medio Blue are calling for that same sort of impact. And on some of these other models down here towards the middle, so not the GFS, they have the temperature getting a lot higher in that PM. So if that's going to be the case, like this Medio Blue one down here, if it goes from 54 in the morning to about 67 in the afternoon, that alone, just that temperature change, could be like a half a stroke to a stroke difference. So it's kind of lining up to be like the perfect storm out there for the AM PM wave guys, where not only are they going to have the lower winds out there on the first day, but potentially better conditions out there on Friday. Now, it's still Tuesday. A lot can change when it comes to this Florida weather, but because sites like DraftKings, FanDuel have already started to account for it, you know, it's something that you at least want to keep in the back end of your mind. So it's personally why I wanted to hold off on a lot of my top end exposure, right, guys? I would call core plays, value plays out here on this sort of video. Guys that even bet for an outrighter top 20s, just to make sure that they were getting the right side of the tee time. So it's something that I'm personally leaning into quite a bit right now. But, you know, tomorrow night, if we end up getting a forecast change and it doesn't look like nearly as clear of an edge over there over the first 2 days, then maybe I incorporate, right, some of the other guys from the other side where we can get slightly better numbers on them over there on the book. So it's definitely something you're going to want to monitor over there before lock. But now that that's out of the way, let's go through our custom modeling for this week and again, some of our pieces of exposure afterwards. So first things first, this golf course is one that you can't really overpower with your distance. In the past, you've seen a lot of power players have success here, but over the last year or so since 2023, the rough has been growing out to about 4 inches to start the week. And because they don't really mow it out there throughout the entire event, it can get close to 5.5 inches by Saturday, Sunday, and really be a penalty for these players. So it's not quite the missed fairway penalty that you have at the Players, which is among the highest that we have on all the PGA Tour, but it's getting a lot closer to that than compared to what you have for your PGA Tour average. So a lot of emphasis, I'd say, over there on that driving accuracy, and also a course that forces you to lay up quite a bit as well. And because of that, you have a lot of shots from 175 yards out here to 225. So I'd say these two proximity buckets, this 175 to 200, also that 200 to 225 yard range, going to be especially important over there in my modeling. I already mentioned some of the accuracy stats being a little bit more important. You can see I've got driving accuracy, also fairways gained over there in the model, and I still think you really want to look at regular shots gained off the tee, as it's a good measure of both the player's accuracy and of course their distance when it comes to off the tee. So I'd say shots gained off the tee, what you want to probably lean into the most, but if you're going to add anything on top of that, you know, these accuracy metrics aren't the worst thing to incorporate. You do have 4 par 5s around this par 71 setup, which might be surprising, but you do have the 5 par 3s, so it's atypical, but you do have some par 5s to go out there and score score on. You can take a look at some overseed putting if you want to, but also some form heading in. Bogey avoidance, especially in this sort of wind, could come in handy the first few days. Around the green as well, not usually something I'm looking at this course, but because you have those winds in play, maybe a larger sample size of shots that are going to come from around the green. And then in terms of our comp courses over here, I've got Muirfield Village, TPC Southwind, and also Sedgefield Country Club that aren't courses that are overly long off the tee. At the Memorial, probably the longest out of the bunch there, but a huge missed fairway penalty at all these different courses. At Memorial, a lot of that comes down to the deep rough. It's about 5 inches over there at that event. At TPC Southwind, it's the highest amount of water balls of any course around there in Tour, so it's more so the hazards that are causing that penalty. And then Sedgefield has that deep rough just like you have at Muirfield, so a lot of your accuracy players tend to find success at these sort of tracks, and also players that are good from the mid to long iron range. So that's what I'm incorporating out there into my analysis. Of course, guys, for all the exact model weightings, you can find those over there on my Patreon page, and a site like Bet the Number, a great site to go out there and build your model with it as well. Or you can take the model weightings that I have there on the Patreon version and go out there and replicate it as close to humanly possible out there for all of your analysis. So make sure to check it out if you guys haven't already. And now let's go ahead and talk about our top pieces of exposure for the Valspar. So as previously mentioned, all these are going to be AM, PM wave players. So guys that are going off early over there on Thursday and then finishing up over there late on Friday. And the reason for that, of course, that weather edge that we mentioned, and it's not concrete, it's not completely set in stone at this point, but I think some value that can be had on these players. So first up, we got Sepp Straka over here at $10,000, and I got him for 22 to 1 out there for the outright number. And at some other books around the industry, he's down to 17.5 to 1, 18 to 1 on a lot of those major books like DraftKings and FanDuel. So you're starting to see a lot of that line movement that I was talking about before. He's got the accuracy off the tee that we'd hope for around this golf course, and you can see over here is my number 1 total model ranking play because he's number 4 in the field when it comes to the recent form ranking as well. So just somebody that across the board has dark green, not really nothing that you can say negative about his game heading in. And also on this overseed to start 2025 has been on fire, gaining over 0.8 strokes per round over here on this overseed. Makes him somebody that'd be hard to pass up. And just to show you where the form's been coming in, mostly over there in the 2 ball striking categories, which is why he's grading out so well out there with my modeling. This is a ball striking heavy course, and guys like Sepp are going to get a massive leg up over some of the other players. His approach stats right on par with guys like a Tommy Fleetwood, a little bit more accurate off the tee than Tommy to start this year. And the short game for both is nearly identical, but the putting stats are more favorable for Sepp Straka. So you can see over here, right, Tommy Ladd losing on that overseed. That combined with the better outright number, Tommy actually has drifted the whole way to 10 to 1 on some books because of that weather edge. Sepp Straka, sitting there at 22 to 1, was just a low-hanging fruit that I went out there and bet. So I already hit the outright bet on him this year over there at the Amex. I've taken a shot on him a few other times, still well up over there on our Sepp Straka exposure. And at these accuracy first sort of golf courses, and especially the mid to long irons, he's a really good mid to long iron player as well. I just think it's a perfect fit for him, and maybe a little bit surprising that he hasn't had more success around here. I guess the sample size probably has a lot to do with it. I only played here last year, then there 5 years ago with his T46 finish. But I think if he had played this event just a little bit more, that he'd probably find a little bit more success. And, you know, perhaps it's the course fit, him realizing that it's a really good setup for him, that he started to come back here the last few years. But either way, with that weather edge in his back pocket, somebody that I was glad to get to in my exposure. Next up, we got Tom Kim here at $9,200. He's plus 3,000 for the outright. That is starting to really drop out there in other sports books. So if you can find anything close to plus 3,000, I'd grab it now if you can. Another player on the right side of the draw that fits this golf course to a T. He's an accurate driver of the golf ball. The iron play has been on fire lately out there for Tom. You can see it over here gaining close to 1.3 strokes gained per round. Off the tee, he's been a little bit subject to water balls the last few events, so that's why over only the last 12 round sample size that it looks like it's into the negative, but still a very accurate driver. I wouldn't worry about that one all that much. The bigger worry is the putting, right, where he's losing 1.5 shots gained putting per round. Now this surface isn't necessarily a massively favorable one for him, right? It's not like Sepp where he's gaining like 0.8 strokes per round, but you can see over here this shots gained putting differential. What this does is it takes a player's sample size on overseed this year, and that's what we have in the shots gained putting overseed. It's only from this season. It compares it to their 24 round baseline, so how they're putting this year in general. And what you can see for Tom Kim, that he's over a half a stroke better better on this type of grass than what you've had for all of this year. And I've changed up how I do this over the last few events just to make it more of a smaller sample size thing to really get a taste for how much better on this type of grass that he's actually performed this season. And you can see for Tom Kim, it's worth about a half a stroke per round, and over a 4-round sample size, right, assuming that he would make the cut, that's a 2-stroke difference, right? That's not something to go out there and ignore. You give him the AM wave advantage that could be brewing over the next day or so. A favorable number in DFS I don't think will be that popular with some of the guys around him, like Will Zalatoris gaining a whole bunch with the irons, Shane Lowry, Corey Connors I think are going to get some attention as well. I believe all on the wrong side of the draw, so I think that's the one thing against those sort of players. But give me some Tom Kim, right? Even if the form is a little bit more sketchy, you can see over there actually losing to the field over his last 12 measured rounds. A lot of that though, the short game, right? Losing about 2 strokes per round in those categories, not something that I think is going to happen all that often for Tom Kim. So a player that I'll take for a little bit of a bounce back this week, especially when we can get that favorable number as well. Next up, we got Michael Kim at $8,900. And if you saw him talking on Twitter over there on Monday, he mentioned that he was hoping to get an AM PM wave tee time. He wanted to be able to avoid a lot of those big gusts, and he got what he wished for, right? Maybe you just got to go over there and ask on Twitter, and the PGA Tour will give you the tee time that you want. But at 40-1, another number that's really been dropping at some of those other books, a player I'll go out there and mix in, especially after his missed cut last week. And some people may say he missed the cut. How could that possibly be a good thing? Well, it's going to keep the ownership a whole lot lower this week. If you take a look at the event history, he's been pretty solid here the last 2 years. No top level finishes, but he's really stepped up his game over the last few months. He's a much better player than what you had here the last few years, and he still went out there, was able to make it to the weekend. But this missed cut down here is really going to keep people off of him. And must we forget that he went 4th, 6th, 13th, 13th of 4 weeks before that, right? 4 top 13 finishes in a row, a golf course that he's essentially built for, right? It's not overly long, which is a good thing for Michael Kim. He's been hitting a lot more fairways here in 2025. He's great putting on this overseed. You can see gains about a 1/4 of a stroke per round, and the irons from the mid to long iron range have really been carrying his game, right? It's why he's been towards the top of a lot of these leaderboards. And if you take a look at the recent form metrics, right, close to 2/3 of a stroke per round on approach, gaining off the tee, and just across the board has been a solid play over his last 3-4 starts. So the kind of guy that I'm actively looking to get over the field on this week. And luckily, because of that missed cut, and I know crazy to say luckily out there with a guy missing the cut, but the ownership is going to be a lot lower than it should be. And if he was $9,000, I almost wish that like Alex Smalley and Michael Kim were switched in price, because if he had that 9 instead of the 8 there at the front end of his price tag, that psychological effect that we sometimes see with the ownership would have made him even lower owned than what we have here. But I like that they put him up there with some of those really good form players like a Smalley. A lot of people are going to want to be playing after his near, he was in the top over there at the Players. Lucas Glover as well. Even JT Poston showed us something over there at the Players Championship. I just don't see Michael Kim being over 20%, right? Maybe that weather edge starts to skew some ownership out here towards him, but a player that I took outright and that I love out here for this event. Before we talk about our last 3 plays here, 3 more value plays and outrights that I've already mixed in, do want to remind you guys where you can find everything that you see on this spreadsheet. I do have 10 outright bets that I've already placed, also 5 top 20 bets over there on the spreadsheet. Unfortunately, right, we're only going to be able to go through 6 of those over here together, right? I can't give you guys every piece of exposure. Got to keep some of it behind the paywall over there for my Patreon members, which helps support the channel and, let me go out there and do all this content for you guys. It takes a lot of time, as you guys could probably imagine, to go out there and put all of this together. And going out there, joining the Patreon page will not only give you access to everything that you see here, but also help support the channel in the process. So I've got all the outright bets. We've got all the projections on there, ownership when that's updated over the next day or so, my entire 150 max poll included as well, including all these bottom tabs completely uncensored. So the shots gained metrics, recent form, the key stat, actual weightings over there on the right side. So check it out. Link in the description of this video to go out there and join the Patreon page for all of that extra analysis. But next up, our next value play, next outright that I took is going to be Keith Mitchell at $7,800. I bet him over there at 60-1 for the outright, and a player that's really been striping the ball off the tee lately. And while this isn't a course where you have to be long off the tee, if you're long and you're accurate off the tee like Keith Mitchell has been, it is a weapon around this golf course. And you can't hit driver every single time, but on the 4 par 5s, it really makes it a lot easier to go out there and reach into. And some of the medium to longer par fours, you can leave yourself 110, 120 yards in the fairway and really go pin hunting out there to some of these tricky locations. And, with that wind out there, I think having that power, being able to take advantage of the par fives is going to be even more useful this year with the harder scoring. So him gaining a bunch off the tee is one of the main reasons I wanted to go out there and play him. If we take a look at his event history, it's been pretty sneaky as well. He had the T17 last year, doesn't play here all that often. Last time it was a 69th back there 4 years ago, but that top 20 last year was when he was in much worse form off the tee than what you have now. You've got him striping it off the tee. You've got a golf course that sets up pretty well for him. My one main concern, I'd say, out there with the course fit, and the reason why he's only number 57 out there in the rankings, is the putting on overseed, which this year has not been that favorable for him. But in the past, if you take a look at his career baseline on the surface, which I may actually go out there and include for next week now that I'm thinking about it, because it'd be good to have both metrics to go out there and go through, he's well into the positive out here on this overseed. It's, where he went out there and won at the Honda Classic was on this sort of surface. He's had a lot of other top finishes down here in Florida over the years as well. So somebody that will hopefully bounce back this week over here on the greens, because the tee to green play has been everything that we're hoping for in a Keith Mitchell. And on that right side of the draw, you've also seen his numbers start to dwindle on some of these books. I believe getting closer to like that 50-1 number on a lot of them. So to be able to grab him at 61 was something that I was glad to go out there and do myself. Next up, we've got Nicolai Hojgaard at 7,300, and we're kind of getting away from the accurate player mold over here with the Nicolai, but he's just an extremely talented player and one of the best iron players that we've had in the field. So on the AM side, 75-1 of a player of his talent level, and you're giving him the advantageous conditions this weekend, or at least hopefully, right? Those advantageous conditions. Now I'm going to be all over Nicolai. So to show you guys why I'm so high on his form lately, you can see he's gaining over 0.75 strokes per round over there on approach. Pretty solid across the board otherwise. And if you go to the last 24 measured rounds, he's been pretty much doing the same exact thing, right? Off the tee could be a little bit better for Nicolai. I do have to say he's one of the longest players that we have in this field. So the fact that he isn't gaining a whole bunch in that category is because he's had some issues over there with the accuracy. But this is the sort of high upside player where if he can go out there and have a spike week with the driving accuracy, he could easily go out there and win this thing. I mean, from fairway in, he's maybe the top 5 player that you have in this field. It's just that the off the tee fit, it's going to have to come together when it comes to that accuracy. So he's the kind of player that I'd prefer in GPPs, just because I do think there's a little bit of risk involved with taking a player that's not that accurate. But when I'm betting outrights at 75-1, right, I'm not that worried about the bottom end and the risk potential, right? It's more so trying to find guys with the actual upside to go out there top 5 and win this thing, which is what you'd want for DFS out there with the top 5. And you got to find the winner, somebody that actually has the horsepower to win this thing if they're going to be betting guys outright down here in the 7K range. So that's the idea over there with the Nicolai. I don't believe he's played here before, but let's go ahead and double check on that. So yeah, no course history over there with Nico. Obviously first time tour card member, so not going to have that kind of experience, but we'll have to see. Maybe it's a course fit that's a little bit sneaky that, I don't think it's the best course fit out there for Nico. That's not where we're playing him here, but maybe it is a good sneaky course fit. We've seen guys surprise us before in the past, and if that's the case, then it'd be an even better play than what we're looking at right now. Then the last player we're going through is going to be Davis Riley, who nearly won here a few years ago. If you guys are new to PGA DFS, maybe didn't know that over there with Davis, but playing him at 200-1 to go ahead and take this thing down. And lately, he's been playing a lot better, and I've been using him in GPPs a lot lately, and it's worked out a lot because he's been making a ton of birdies, been making cuts, which is really the main thing for Davis. He's always going to outscore his placement because he's an extremely aggressive player, but the iron play has returned. He's now getting back to gaining over there with the irons. The short game has been pretty solid for him as well, and the last 24 rounds is where it starts to get a little bit worse, right? That's where you start to see all those missed cuts, right, start to come on in. But the last 12 rounds, he's starting to really clean this thing up. And to go back to that event history to show you where he had that top level finish, not only was it that second in a playoff, he obviously lost to Sam Burns that year, but he top 20'd the year after that. And sure, last year was the missed cut. He's been in that down stretch for like a year at this point. So not a surprise that he missed the cut last year at this kind of event. But if he's digging himself out of that hole, I love the upside here. He's a top 40 player when it comes to that recent form ranking, a player that for at least 2025 has been a gainer over here on this overseed. And just like at Keith Mitchell, you take a look at his career stats on this overseed, he's one of the best players that you have in this field. So I love the course history. I like the fact that he's on that, upward trajectory that we're looking for in players. And at 200 to 1, his odds were also starting to get a little bit shorter on other books. So a kind of number that if you can still find it, go out there and play myself. And in DFS, he's not going to be chalky, right? You're talking at most maybe like 3-4% ownership on this sort of play, more than likely closer to maybe the 2% mark over there in GPPs. The kind of guy that even if you threw in 5 to 7% of your lineups, that is going to get you over the field when it comes to your exposure. So those are the kind of diamonds in the rough that I'm looking for down towards the bottom. And as I mentioned before, guys, right, this is far from all the plays that I'm going to be getting to. There are going to be, 4 more outright bets already over here on the spreadsheet. So join the Patreon page. Make sure to check those out if you guys haven't already. And also, I believe it was 5 top 20 bets that I took towards the middle to bottom end of the board. So, some sprinkles trying to find some guys that really fit this golf course well and try and smack those books. Alrighty, guys, that is all I've got for this week's DFS and betting preview. Hopefully I feel a little bit more prepared to go out there and get to your exposure. Go ahead, smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Also subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. That'll of course include our DFS live stream over there tomorrow night, going over any of your questions down there in the live chat. We're going to take a look at the weather forecast again, make sure we're all set when it comes to that edge, as well as go through some ownership trends, some lineup construction, maybe even some contest selection over there on DraftKings. Make sure you're ready for all of your exposure. And we'll also be going through some underdog and prize pick stuff over there as well. So if any of that is something that you guys want to check out there before the event starts, make sure to tune on into that over there tomorrow night. That'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern time when we're going live. But outside of that, the other thing I need from you guys, other than smashing the like button, is to also comment down below who you've got winning this golf tournament. If you guys can give me somebody at least 30 to 1, so make sure to check those sports books, make sure they're at least 30 to 1 on every single one of them. You at least go to like an odds board, right? And make sure they're at least 30 to 1. You will win a free month access to my Patreon page. So if you guys want to get all of those outright bets, projections, my entire 150 max pool out there for your research, make sure to go ahead, guess that player down below. And, if you want to get real wacky about it, let's say they're at least 200 to 1 and they win, I'm going to give you guys 2 free months. So I'll incentivize to really go out there and take a long shot. I mean, last year you had Malnati get the job done. You've seen some really wacky players go out there and get the job done to win here around a Valspar Championship. Might be worth going, especially down the odds board out there with a few guys. But that's all over there for the giveaway this week. Best of luck over there with all of your exposure. Another on the giveaway, first come, first serve. So once a player's taken once, they cannot be taken again. So go ahead, claim your player before anyone else does. But as I said, best of luck with all the exposure that you're getting to, whether it's in DFS or over there with any of those outright bets. Let's take down a contest or two. I hope to see you guys towards the top end of those leaderboards. And I'll see you guys tomorrow night over there for the live stream.